Hello, this is Neurodiversity Ireland's lived experience series. So today I'm going to talk about my experience of school breakdown and neurodivergent burnout. So, my name is Sorcha Rice. I'm autistic, ADHD with a PDA profile, and I'm a senior occupational therapist and the clinical manager at Neurodiversity Ireland. I'm really passionate about highlighting practical supports for neurodivergent individuals with PDA profiles. Just for a disclaimer for today's video, I am going to talk about my breakdown in detail, so if this is triggering for you, please skip this. So, to give a bit of background or context to my breakdown, at 15, I had no identification. So, I didn't know I was autistic, ADHD, or PDA. Had no language or kind of understanding of my experience at the time. So, from the outside, when I went through my breakdown, it looked like it happened suddenly out of nowhere. And I hear this a lot working with children who are currently also going through school breakdowns or burnouts, is that teachers or families are like, it happened out of nowhere. I just don't understand. But actually, it was years and years of masking and dysregulation that built up on my nervous system that led to the breakdown. So I've always worked incredibly hard to appear fine, good, high achieving, and independent on the outside. And I was masking constantly. So when you're like the good student or the quiet, polite girl, the one who always copes, what happens is people don't add any extra demands and pressure on you. So, if you're like sick or you look sad, people will come up to you and say, "Oh, are you okay? What's wrong? How can I help? Do you want to talk about your feelings?" Like, all of that is too much on my nervous system. That's way too much pressure, and that's dysregulating for me, and that triggers my PDA. So, to survive and to support my nervous system, I mask to get rid of those extra demands and pressure. But all that masking really is exhausting, and my system never got true rest, not even at home. So if I think about the year before my school breakdown and burnout, there were lots of signs that I was going through burnout. So I was restricting my food, not for diet reasons, but as a way to create predictability and autonomy. So I knew exactly how my body was going to feel. I also had toileting difficulties, so frequent UTIs and constipation, sleep differences, so staying up late, sleeping until the afternoon, difficulty with basic care, and more impulsive spending to get quick dopamine and regulation. So overall, I felt overwhelmed, but because I didn't understand why, I assumed it was just a personal flaw. So when I was 15, I had to move from Saudi Arabia to Indiana. It's kind of like near Chicago in the US. So if you know anything about Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, the weather is so predictable. It is warm and sunny most of the time. My school environment was also very regulating and very like interest based learning. So they all honored all forms of communication as well, and I don't know, the teaching was just incredible. So like, say we were learning about Native Americans, we were watching movies, looking at presentations, reading books, to better understand their experience. We learned about their dress and the importance of symbolization on it, and so then we could create our own, with what was meaningful to us. So yeah, and then we learned like the music for it as well with the drumming. So that was kind of the type of education I grew up in. I also had longer recess or yard time. And then every day for lunch, I would walk or scooter home, have my lunch, and then come back to school. So I always had a clear break as well. And the compound itself, so where we lived, felt really safe and familiar. Everyone had the same house based on like how many children you had. Because it was a compound in Saudi, we didn't have new people or new faces constantly. Like, I was very prepared when we were getting a new student. So it was just the perfect environment for a neurodivergent PDAer. All of that protected my nervous system. So it wasn't like I didn't grow up with demands and pressure, but it was because I had such a safe, predictable, regulating environment that helped me cope more. And then when I moved to Indiana, so Indiana is near Chicago. If you know anything about that kind of area, there is extreme differences in weather. So it is sunny in the summer, and then I can't even describe how much snow there is in the winter time. And it was just such a huge change. So for me, I am very sensitive about clothes. So I like to wear the same thing every day. That was easy in Saudi because the weather was the same. So I could cope with that. In Indiana, obviously in the summertime, I would have to wear something different to the wintertime. You have like coats and hats and scarves. All of that is, I had the scarves, like the woolly scarves around your neck. Don't like them. Don't like wearing hats. Like it was just, there's so much change. Like even now living in Ireland, where obviously go through seasons as well, I find it so difficult to transition into the different months and like change clothes. So like for example, at the moment we're in December, I'm still wearing my Birkenstocks, even though I should be probably in boots or runners, because I find it so hard to transition and change. I just would love to wear the same thing every day for the rest of my life. But yeah, so as well in my boarding school, there's lots of academic pressure. So lots talking about what are you going to do in college, and you have to do these exams, and it just was very stressful. I didn't have enough regulation to cope against all this pressure on my nervous system, and I was really far from home. I felt the build up, but I convinced myself that I can manage if I worked hard enough and just was good. So lots of internal pressure. And because this was a boarding school, I lived at school. There is no recovery time anymore. Every demand, every expectation, every interaction was unrelenting. And it was such a nice environment. I had such lovely friends. But still, my eating became even harder. Toileting was still difficult. My sleep was all over the place. I didn't have any way to regulate my nervous system safely, and my whole system was running in survival mode. I picked these pictures on the right to show, so they were about like 2 weeks before I had my breakdown, and I think it's important to look at them because I'm laughing with my friends, I'm making funny faces, like you wouldn't look at me and think, oh, she's about to have a breakdown, but I was, and I was so dysregulated. So, this is what masking looks like. I think this is often lost on people, or they might not understand. Um, but this is masking to survive, and this is how you're coping. So inside I was so dysregulated, wasn't eating, and like just was having such a difficult time. So then I reached the breaking point. There wasn't one trigger, there wasn't one cause, there wasn't one thing that went wrong. I just reached a point where I couldn't mask anymore. My body was shutting down, my dysregulation was overflowing, and I just was exhausted on a level I didn't know was possible, and I completely broke down. I think it's important to highlight that there's always someone that you can talk to. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how incredibly difficult it is to ask for help. But please reach out. There's always someone that you can text, that you can ring. Someone is there to listen to you. So please reach out. So the hardest thing I've ever done was saying, I need help. In my head, I kept trying to find the one thing that was causing it. I believed if I could name that one thing, I could fix myself and everything could go back to normal. But neurodivergent burnout isn't one thing, it's everything mixed together and built up over time. It's a whole nervous system overwhelmed. So, especially when you're a child, masking, coping, holding everything in without support, understanding, or the language for what's actually happening, this is incredibly difficult. So, yeah, I just can't explain how difficult it is to ask for help. And this wasn't because my family or my school made it hard. In fact, they didn't. I was incredibly lucky. My school put no pressure on me to come back. My parents offered unconditional positive regard, so there was no judgment. It was just, we want you to be safe. But even with that support, my school breakdown was one of the most overwhelming, difficult experiences of my life. So this was when I was 15. It felt like, I can't even describe, so I felt like I had been for so many years trying to shove my dysregulation into a tight ball and just kind of keep it safe. And then when everything fell apart, it was like this ball exploded, and my world became so unsafe. I didn't know what my future was going to look like. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what people were going to say. I knew I couldn't cope, and it just was like everything fell apart. I felt like I was giving up everything. I get so emotional talking about this time in my life because it's so hard. I think, sorry. Um, I felt like I was failing, um, and, like, I could see everyone else managing in school, and I just didn't understand, like, what was wrong with me, and this was without external pressure. I think sometimes you can forget that children feel the pressure of society. So we already know you're meant to be in school because that's the path to your future. We feel that whether you say it to us or not, that's just, we know that. And even now at 31, I still carry so much shame and sadness about that time in my life. And that's how deep it runs. So now I work with so many children that are 7, 8, 9, even younger, who don't have the words that I had, who are experiencing school burnout. Children who internalize the idea that leaving school is losing their future, that they're doing something wrong, that they should just be okay in school. School breakdowns are not a choice. This is not something children or teenagers choose to do. They are what happens when a child's nervous system is overwhelmed beyond capacity. So when I did finally ask for help, my parents met me with unconditional positive regard. So I think that is the most important thing that you can do for anyone who's going through school burnout. There was no questioning me, there was no minimizing it, there was no, oh, just push through, you'll be fine tomorrow. It was just, you're stopping, you're coming home, we've got you. As soon as I asked for help, my mum got on a plane from Saudi and flew over. I didn't have to justify myself or prove anything. I was just believed. This shouldn't be exceptional, but for many neurodivergent children and teens, it is. And so once my mom was there, I was seen by a psychiatrist and a psychologist. And like many autistic, ADHD, PDA teens, especially girls, I was misdiagnosed. The focus was what condition explains this and what medication will fix it and what's the one cause. But none of that touched on what was really happening. My nervous system was overwhelmed. So then I returned to Saudi Arabia with my mom, and we met a psychiatrist who took a very different approach. He said, this isn't about antidepressants, you're so young. This isn't about one problem to solve. Your whole system is overloaded. You need to focus on moving your body. He didn't use the language of regulation, but that's exactly what he meant. Movement, sensory input, predictability, and reconnecting with my body. And it helped because it met me where my nervous system actually was. Then reintegrating into school, I think I often get so many questions on how did I go back to school? And I think this should be its own entire course. Um, but I wanted to say that the whole reintegration process to get me back into school was really difficult, and I can share that in more detail. But the important piece is I recovered enough to return to school, yet the same thing happened again. So the very next year, at the same time of year, it's February, I burnt out again, and then again in February in college. And it was because I didn't know I was autistic, ADHD, PDA, that my nervous system was so sensitive, that I had difficulty with social communication and executive functioning. So I knew the regulation helped me, and that was really important, but I couldn't identify what was like triggering my nervous system. So this is why it is so important to get the right identification. This is why it's life changing, not because you're giving them a label or giving them a label to have excuses. And it's not because it explains everything, but it does give you a better understanding of yourself. Now I know that too much social communication and too much sensory input, too many demands and pressure, and a loss of autonomy will impact my capacity. And if those needs go unseen or I ignore them, burnout is going to happen. Not because I'm weak, not because I'm not trying, but because I have a neurotype with a sensitive nervous system. And when the environment doesn't match my neurotype, burnout is not a mystery, it's very predictable. So, what I understand now, my breakdown makes sense. My needs were valid and not too much. My body was communicating what I couldn't. My system wasn't failing, it was protecting me. And burnout happens when the environment's demands are more than my nervous system can sustain. So, why do I share this? Because it is not easy to talk about this time in my life. I am incredibly emotional talking about it. But so many autistic ADHD PDAers hit the same wall, and it's preventable. Burnout is preventable when we understand masking, when we understand sensory needs and autonomy and our nervous system, we understand neurotypes, then we can prevent burnout. Burnout never, ever, ever happens out of nowhere. It is a story of unmet needs over a long period of time. It has no reflection on you and your resilience, because you are incredibly resilient already. And because asking for help should never, ever feel like the hardest thing a child has to do. Sorry. Ah, so difficult to talk about. So if you know a child or teen that is going through burnout, please do not shame them. Do not coerce them. Do not put pressure on them to get back into environments that their system cannot tolerate. They are not giving up, they are not failing, and they are not avoiding or refusing to go to school. They are surviving. And the most protective thing we can offer is belief for safety and unconditional positive regard, not pressure, not punishment, and not fear. So, thank you for listening to my experience of school burnout. Please stay tuned for more of our lived experience series, because our voices matter, our stories matter, and they deserve to be heard. If you want to hear more about my lived experience or other ideas for support, this is my Instagram. It's ot_Sorcha Rice. With Neurodiversity Ireland, we do lots of school trainings, parent talks, and obviously therapy as well. So, yeah, thank you for listening.